No. We begin today the Gemara on Daf Mem Beis Amud Aleph, right at the beginning of the Yamot. The Gemara continues another halacha here, b'nigeya to the cutting of the hair by the Nazir, the Metzayre. So it was mentioned before a Mishnah about this, and the Gemara here brings back this Mishnah. Omamar was mentioned before, v'kulam shegilchu shaloi betar. All of them, meaning this is regarding the Nazir, the Metzayre, or the Leviim, they have to cut the hair from their body. If it was cut without a razor, oy sheshir or shtei sairis, or two hairs were left over. So by the Leviim and the Metzayre, that's in the entire body. By the Nazir, it's two hairs of his head. You've done nothing. The mitzvah is not fulfilled. Just two hairs left out is not the fulfillment of the mitzvah, even though you cut the overwhelming majority of the hair. It doesn't matter. So now based on this, from here we could learn out that it seems like that this, what the Mishnah is saying is, this is a special chiddush, a special halacha that we learned here. That just two hairs left out, your mitzvah is not done. So if so, from here we could learn, rubai kukuloi mid'iraisa, that otherwise, when you have something that's done, with the majority of it is done, it's as if it's all done, and that's a rule minatayra. Mimai, how do I know that that's a rule minatayra? Midigol irachmana gabi nazir. Since the Torah here has to specifically let us know this chiddush. And the reason where we learn this out from is the Torah says that on the seventh day you should cut the hair, and this is a pasuk that says that, which is extra. It already says before that vigilach esreishay, that you have to cut the hair, and it says again what is it coming to tell me? Here, when you cut the hairs, you have to cut every single hair, even if you only left out two, it's not done. So that tells me that everywhere else where the Torah does not clarify this, rubai kekulai, when you have raiv, it's as if it's all done. Rav Yosef Rav Chanina asks on this halacha and on this limud that we just learned out from B'yem Hashvi Galchano, Hai Benazir Tarmiksiv. That pasuk B'yem Hashvi Galchano is talking about a situation where a person has to cut his hair because he became tameh in the middle of his naziris. We were speaking about the Nazir that has to cut his hair at his conclusion of his naziris, when he's tahir. And you bring me a pasuk that it says by the Nazir tameh. So how do we learn from there regarding what we're talking about, which is the Nazir tahir, that he has to cut every single hair, and if he leaves out two hairs, it's not going to be the mitzvah. So on this question of Rav Yosef Rav Chanina, they laughed on it by Marava. They didn't accept this question at all. Marava is in Eretz Yisrael. And they said, there's no reason to ask this question because we learn them out from each other. Mechti, let's see. Nazir Tameh de Bitar Minola. From where do I know that a Nazir Tameh that also has to cut his hair and then restart his Naziris? How do we know that when he has to cut his hair that it has to be done with a razor? So we learn it out. Min Nazir Tahir Yalef. We learn out from a Nazir Tahir. We see in the Psukim that they're compared to each other. The cutting of the hair of the Nazir Tameh and the Nazir Tahir are compared to each other. So lazy Nazir Tahir v'leilev Nazir Tameh. So therefore, if that's so, just so we can learn out the halacha of a Nazir Tameh regarding cutting the hair with a razor from the Nazir Tahir, so we could also learn out the Nazir Tahir from the Nazir Tameh. Ma Tameh, just like we see in the pasuk by the Nazir Tameh that has to cut his hair, that kishia shtei sairis. If he left over two hairs v'loi klum mavat, he's done nothing. It's not, he didn't fulfill his mitzvah. The same is also with a Nazir Tameh, or Nazir Tahir rather. If he left over two hairs, he's done nothing. So therefore, the fact that it says it by Nazir Tameh is not a question because these two halachas of the mitzvah, to cut the hair, are learned out from each other. Abaye asked the following shaila. Yeah, so over here we see the conclusion is Rubei Kekulei Mid'iraisa, correct. This concept of Rubei Kekulei is different than the concept of Roiv that you find in Kol HaTorah Kula, just by the way. Roiv usually means that you follow Roiv. It's not Kekulei, but you follow it. But there are some places where you have to have Kulei, but Rubai is Kekulei. So it's a different kind of concept than Roiv. Okay, there's an arichas about this in Achreinim, but it's a different concept.
Does it have to be a bigger Roiv?
Could be. Over here you have Mamish overwhelmed, right, it's only Shtei Sidus, yeah. Boy, Abaye asked the following shaila. Nazir shegilach, so a Nazir that cut all his hair, but v'shir shtei sidus, he left out two hairs, and it's not the mitzvah is not done. So the hairs of his head started growing back already. And now and then those two hairs that he left out, he went and cut them. So what's the halacha now? do I say that this holds back, the mitzvah is not done? Because when you came to cut the other 2 hairs, the other hairs of your head already grew back. So it's not shaved of all the hairs. Or maybe not. So, because the fact is you did cut all the hairs of your head. True, you didn't cut them all at the same time. First you cut all the hair, leaving out these 2 hairs. Then afterwards you're cutting these 2 hairs. But, b'payil, you did shave all the hair of your head, even if it's not at the same time.
That wasn't the end of Nazirus?
At the end of the Naziris.
How can it be truly
A week later, it takes a week to grow back the hair. So he cut all the hairs besides 2 hairs. Then a week later, he cut those 2 remaining hairs that he didn't cut.
He kept Nazirus another week.
There's different halachas you had before, if you still have to keep the Naziris or not, but he didn't cut it at the same time. That's the shaila. Another shaila, the Gemara doesn't answer this. Another shaila. Rav asked the shaila, Nazir shegilach v'niach shtei seides. So a Nazir cut all the hair, and he left over 2 hairs. And now he comes to cut off those 2 hairs. He didn't wait to cut off those other 2 hairs. He comes now to cut those 2 hairs. V'gilach achas. He cut another hair. V'noshra achas. But now another hair fell out on its own. He didn't have to cut it just fell out. Mahu. What's going to be the halacha here? Did he fulfill his mitzvah or not? So seemingly what Rav's question is, so in the beginning when he cut all his hair and he left out these 2 hairs, he didn't do the mitzvah. Now, when he cut those other 2 hairs, we see that 2 hairs is what's considered significant to cut. If you cut just one and not a second one, cutting 1 hair is not a significant giluach. It's nothing. So over here, when he comes to finish the mitzvah, he only cuts 1 hair, but the other hair falls out on its own. So should I say that it's an insignificant giluach that he did, so therefore it's not the mitzvah? That was the shaila.
You got the same question on the beginning too. He
cut the hairs.
He came to cut the hair after 30 days, and half of it fell out.
Okay. So the Gemara asks on this. I hear what you're saying. The Gemara is sort of a similar. Let's look what the Gemara asks here. The Gemara doesn't accept the shaila of Rav. He asked Ravina about Rav's shaila. What's the shaila Rav is asking? Gilach saida can be Rav. Rav has a shaila about a person that cuts 1 hair at a time. Sort of what you're saying. Every time a person cuts the hair, he doesn't cut doesn't shave his entire head in 1 second. He cuts 1 hair, another hair, another hair. So that's what happened over here. He cut all the hairs of his head. He left out 2, and now he came to cut those 2. He cut 1, and the other one fell out. So what should be the problem? So he's cutting 1 hair at a time. Why should it not be the fulfillment of the mitzvah? So therefore the Gemara changes that the shaila was different. Ella Eime, rather say, this is what Rava was asking. What happened was he cut all the hairs of his head. Now he had 2 hairs left over. Noshra achas. Now 1 hair fell out on its own. And v'gilach achas. And now he cut 1 hair of his head. So now he only cut 1 hair. Mahu. What's going to be the halacha now? So here, the Rishonim say the shaila is because 1 hair fell out before he came to cut off those 2 hairs. Cutting 1 hair is insignificant. You have to have at least 2 hairs that it should be a giluach that's chashuv. So because 1 hair, true, in a regular case where you cut here 1 hair at a time, another hair, of course it's a giluach. But over here, you stopped. And now you left over 2 hairs. And now 1 hair already fell out. So now you're only cutting 1 hair. Cutting that 1 hair is insignificant. So it comes out that you did a giluach. The first part of your giluach was not good because you left out 2 hairs. The second part of your giluach is just 1 hair, and that's also insignificant. So therefore, you can't combine them together, and it's not a full, proper giluach for the mitzvah. That was Rav Shaila. So he answered that giluach enkan, seyar enkan. That you do not have the mitzvah of giluach because you don't have hair. So in other words, what he's saying is because 1 hair already fell out before, so therefore, now when you're cutting the 1 remaining hair, you don't have the mitzvah of giluach properly. But the Gemara asks on this, wouldn't the svara be the opposite? Seyar enkan, if now that 1 hair already fell out, so now you don't have that hair, you only have 1 hair left, so adarab, I should say giluach yashkan. So now when he cuts that 1 remaining hair, because the other hair already fell out, so he is completely shaving his head. I mean, I should say the opposite. So the Gemara says, what he meant to say is, even though now at the end he has no hair left on his head, so he's fully shaved, but nevertheless, mitzvahs giluach enkan. The mitzvah that he has to cut the hair, that wasn't accomplished. Because when he cut the hair the first time, he left out 2 hairs. And when he came to cut the second time, there was only 1 hair left. And the other hair fell out already on its own. Cutting 1 hair is an act of giluach, which is insignificant. It has to be at least 2 hairs. So therefore, he doesn't have the mitzvah. You see,
a week, a week.
and do the whole giluach over again, correct?
Even if you only have 1 year period.
So you see from here what happens with a person that's bald, and only has 1 hair, so he can't do the mitzvah, huh?
Can't be a Nazir.
Or if he's going to be a Nazir, he can't ever stop it. He can't conclude his Naziris because he can't be fulfill the mitzvah of Giluach. I'm not sure. Or maybe there's a cloud. The Gemara says Heichad lo yafshe. If it's something it's impossible otherwise, so then that's what it is. I'm not sure. Okay, Zok the Eilige Mishneh Nazir Chayfif. A Nazir, which is not allowed to pull out any hairs of his head, he's allowed to be Chayfif. He's allowed to wash the hairs of his head with soap, with shampoo. Umefaspis, and he's also allowed to separate the hairs with his hands. If his hairs are tangled, he can separate the hairs with his hands. Aval loisaidik, but he's not allowed to comb his hairs.
What's that?
Comb. So again, he's not allowed to comb his hairs, and because the point over here is that we don't want his hairs to fall out. So if he's going to be combing his hair, he's a Nazir, so the hair is going to fall out. Okay, so the Gemara explains now the pshat in the Mishnah. It's first it says that he is allowed, then he says he's not allowed. So the Gemara, the first part of the Mishnah, when it says that he's allowed to wash his hair, or he's allowed to separate the tangled hair, so mani, according to who is this going? Rab Shimoni. It's following Rab Shimon's opinion. What's the chiddush of Rab Shimon's opinion? The Amar Rab Shimon says, Davar she'ein miskaven mutter. Regarding all isurim, if you're doing one action, and then there's an issa that happens automatically, but you didn't even intend to do that, so then the issa that happens unintentionally is completely mutter. Right? The typical example of Rab Shimon's halacha regarding Hilchos Shabbos is when a person drags a bench on the ground and it ends up making a charitz, it makes an indent in the ground, which is the mloch of charisha, but you didn't intend to do that. So then there's no issa. You're not miskaven. So over here the same thing. The first part of the Mishnah is saying that you could shampoo your hair, you can untangle your hair, but you're not intending to pull out any hair. You do it softly, lightly, and if hairs fall out, that's not your intention at all. So therefore it's mutter. That's the first part of the Mishnah. But then what does it say in this next part of the Mishnah? You're not allowed to comb your hair. Why not? Because the hair could fall out. So Asya and Rabbanan, that goes according to the Rabbanan. You're not trying to pull out any hairs, you're just trying to comb your hair. And the hair fall out automatically. And still the Mishnah says you're not allowed. What's the difference? Reisha Rab Shimon. The first part of the Mishnah is Rab Shimon v'Seifer Rabbanan. The second part of the Mishnah is the Rabbanan. So Rabba answers, Kula Rab Shimoni. The entire Mishnah is all Rab Shimon. But Kala Seirik lahasir nimin meduldalin miskaven. The person that's combing the hair, or the Gemara says everyone that combs his hair, what's his kavanah? Why is he combing his hair? Because he wants to remove nimin miduldalis. That's hairs that are already semi-detached. They're a little bit attached, or semi-detached, or sort of hanging. They're still partially attached. Miskaven, that's his intention. So the simple pshat of the Gemara is that by the case of the Seirik, he's actually having kavanah to pull out those loose hairs that are in his hair. So over here it is miskaven. In the first part of the Mishnah, he's just shampooing or he's untangling his hair, but he doesn't want to pull out any hair. So that's saying miskaven. Well, the second part of the Mishnah, it's miskaven. So therefore, it's going to be aser. That's the pshat that the Mefarish says and the Taisa says, but the Rosh says another pshat, and this is the pshat that's brought in the Gemara and Shabbos when it speaks about this, that the Gemara means to say that not that he's actually miskaven. What it means to say is that when you comb the hair, it's impossible that hairs shouldn't fall out. So that's what's called psik reisha. In the first part of the Mishnah, when he's shampooing or just untangling the hairs lightly, so lav dafka hairs will fall out. In such a case, I say, if they end up falling out, it happened unintended, so there's no isser. But even if you're doing it without kavanah, but it's psik reisha, it must happen. It's impossible otherwise, so then it's going to be usher even without you having kavanah. And some takas say that the pshat is that it's as if you had kavanah for that. You can't say I didn't have kavanah for that. It's as if you're mechavan for that because it must happen. That's the pshat in the Gemara here when it says miskavan. Zok Teilige Mishneh, Rabbi Shmuel says, Lo yochuf ba'adame, don't shampoo your hair with this soap that's made from earth. It's more of a rough soap. Because that causes the hairs to fall out. So this is something which, like we just said, psik reisha, it's for sure going to pull out the hairs, whether you're having kavanah, whether you're not having kavanah, it's for sure going to take out hairs. The question or the shaila was asked regarding the pshat in this Mishnah. How do you read the Mishnah? It's saying don't use this soap made from the earth because this soap actually pulls out hairs. Tanan, that's what the Mishnah is saying. Or perhaps the way to read the Mishnah is mipnei hamasheres, because of this soap made of adama that could pull out hairs. Tanan. That's what the Mishnah said. The Gemara explains the difference between these two ways to read the Mishnah. What's the difference? If there's another type of soap which is also made from earth, but it's not as tough and it doesn't pull out hairs. If you read in the Mishnah, don't use the soap made from earth because it pulls out hairs. So if you have the soap made from this earth and you know for a fact that it does not pull out hairs, shaper. So then it's okay, it's allowed to be used. But if you're going to say, well, you read the Mishnah that don't use the soap made from earth because of the soap made of earth that pulls out hairs, so klala. So you can't use any soap made from hairs because there's a gzeira midrabanan, because you might confuse it with the other soap that does pull out hairs. Teiku, this remains unresolved. Mishnah, Nazir, Shahaya, Shoise, Yayin, Kalayim. A Nazir is drinking wine the entire day. He's only chayiv malchus once for all of the wine that he drank. But how about if Amrullah, he was being warned? The Adam warned him about this. Al tishta. Every time he drank another revius of the wine or a kazayas of the wine, whatever the shear it is, and he warned him again and again. And and he keeps on drinking. Chayiv al kolachas vachas. So he'll be chayiv each time he drank the shear, another malchus. Similar, he's cutting hairs from his head all day. He's chayiv only once. Every time he cuts another hair, he's being warned, don't cut your hair. And he continues cutting his hair. So be chayiv for every hair he cut. As we learned before, the chi of the malchus for cutting the hairs is for every hair. So be chayiv again and again. The same thing is regarding the third Isser of the Nazir. He's mitam himself to dead bodies all day. He's only chayiv once. He's being told again and again, do not become tameh. He's warned. And chayiv al kolachas v'chachas. He's chayiv for every single time he's mitam himself. So the Gemara here will focus on the last halacha of the Mishnah regarding tumeh. Because tumeh is very different than the two previous cases. When it comes to drinking wine, I drank one glass of wine, then I drank another glass of wine. One is really not related to the other. Or when it comes to cutting hairs, I cut one hair, I cut another hair. One is really not related to the other either. So you can understand why, if you got a separate warning for each one, he'll be chayav for each one of them. But when it comes to tumeh, though, it's different. Tumeh, once he's tameh, he's tameh. So it's a big chiddush to say regarding tumeh that he became tameh once and he'll be chayav a second time for being mitam himself again.
Maybe by the SARS it wasn't hefsek too big, but a smaller hefsek maybe. It's
okay, true. Even but even if it's teichke they did, but the fact is each hair is separate. But by tumeh l'chayr he's tumeh already. So the Gemara starts off over here with two different versions of what Rav Huna said about this. So Itmer, Amar Rabbe, Amar Rav Huna. Rabbe said in the name of Rav Huna, Mikra Male Dibra Kasav. There's already a full pasuk in the Torah that specifies all different ways of becoming tameh that are not allowed for a nazir. Lo yitama. It says in the pasuk lo yitama. Now in that pasuk lo yitama, it says la aviv liimer la achal achayser lo yitama lehem b'moisam. And that pasuk it includes any way of tameh that the nazir is not allowed to become tameh. So now keshehu aimer. Now there's another pasuk that says this again. Lo yavai. So in that pasuk it says kol yemei azira l'Hashem al nefesh meis lo yavai. That he should not come to a nefesh meis. Why is it coming to say this again? Lahazhiroi al atome, lahazhiroi al habiyah. What it's coming to say is that if he was warned twice, if he was warned once for tumah, and he was warned a second time for entering into tumah. What does entering into tumah mean? The tumah of oil. When you come under the roof where there's a mace over there. So then you're going to be chayiv twice. In other words, what he's saying is there's two types of tumah. There's the type of tumah when you touch a mace or you carry a mace. That's one type of tumah. Then there's a type of tumah which is tumas oil. Tumas oil, you're not even touching the mace, but you become tummy just because you're under the same roof with the mace. So it's two different types of tumah. And as we'll see soon in the Gemara, the tumah of touching the mace is more stringent than the tumah of oil. So what we learn out over here is that by the Nazir, if he's becoming tameh, and the tumah is both that he's touching and he's becoming tumah of the tumah by the mace for the oil, and he's warned twice about this. He's warned about the tumah and he's warned about the tumah of oil. That'll be chayiv malchus twice because of these two psukim. Because it says in one pasuk lo yatama and another pasuk lo yavai. Aval tumah lo. But Rav Huna says, if this Nazir became Tomei once, touched the mace, he became Tomei, then he becomes Tomei a second time, and you're warning him twice, he's not going to be Chayiv Malka separately for each one of them, because once he's already Tomei, he's Tomei. He's not Chayiv again. That's one version of what Rav Huna said. Rabbah said this in the name of Rav Huna. Rav Yosef came and said, no, Ha Elikim, which is a lashon of a shvua. I can swear that Rav Huna said different. Amar Rav Huna said, Afila Tume v'Tume, that the Nazir, he became tummy once, he became tummy again. It's the same tummy. He touched the mace and again, second time. Doesn't matter if he's worn twice. He's going to become tummy again, or he's over again, and he's going to be chayiv malchus again. To Amar Rav Huna, and he said, this is what Rav Huna said. Nazir shaya oimid beveis hakvaris. This Nazir is standing in the Beis HaKvaris, so the very fact that he's in the Beis HaKvaris, he's already Tameh. And now, Vaishitu Loi Meisai, they gave him over a dead body, Umeis Acher, or another dead body as well, V'Nagabai, and he touches, and then Chayev, he's going to be Chayev. So what do you see over here? That Rav Huna said, he's already Tameh because he's standing in the Beis HaKvaris. And you give him a mace, he's going to be Chayev. So the question now on this is, but why should he be chayiv? He's already tamei. He's standing in the Beis HaKvaris and he's already tamei. Elolav shma minov. So from this we understand that what did Rav Huna say? That Omer Rav Huna afile tume v'tume. Even though he's already tamei, but it doesn't matter. If he becomes tamei again, he's going to be chayiv a second time, which is basically what we learned in the Mishnah. The Gemara is going to bring the Mishnah in a second. Again? Well, the chayra has to be chayiv every single time. He's going to have to have a second warning. If every malchus, you always have to have a azara. But the point is that he's going to be chayiv for both tumas. Not only if it's a tumas oyel and a tumah of touching, like the first version, Rabbi said, lo yitama and lo yavoy, but even two tumas, he's going to be chayiv again.
Oh, here's those two tumas.
What do you mean, two tumas?
One tumah of standing in the basic forest.
Right.
One tumah
Okay,
of
the
touching.
Gemara, true. So it's not exactly the same tumah.
Right.
Not true. The Gemara is going to point that out. That's going to be the point soon in the Gemara. Eis ve'Abaye. So Abaye asks on this halacha regarding a Nazir that we learn here from Rav Huna that you can have one tumah and chayiv again for becoming tummy again. By a kain is also not allowed to become tummy. So kain shahayolei meis munach al kseifai. A kain already he's carrying a dead body. Nevaishitulei meisai umeis acher, and they handed him over another mace. V'nagabai. And he touched the second mace. Yachal yechayiv, I would think that he should be chayiv a second time for this. Talmud Loima, the pasuk says v'lo yechalel, or the Rishonim here are actually not good as v'lo yechalel, since it's not a pasuk that says by tumah, but they're good as the pasuk lehei chaloi, that you're not allowed to become tamei because this will desecrate your kohuna. What do we understand from this pasuk? B'misha eina mechulel, that he's only chayiv for becoming tamei if he did not desecrate his status yet. So that excludes this kayin, since he's already tamei, so he's mechulol. So if he gets now another, if he's carrying a mace already, and now he touches another mace, he's not going to be tamei. Okay, so the question is, just like you see by a kayin, that once he's tamei, becoming tamei a second time, there's no isser, there's no additional lav for this. So the same thing should be by a nazir. Once he's tamei, there should be no additional lav for a secondary tumah. Oh, Malay. So Rav Yosef says to Abaye, you're asking me from this Braisa that it says regarding a Kayin. Why are you going there? You should have a problem from what it says in our Mishnah. If you hold that a secondary tumah, you're not chayiv a second time, how are you going to understand our Mishnah? In the Mishnah it says, this nazir becomes tamid to mesim all day, and a chayiv alachas. He's chayiv only once, but then omru loy alta tam, if he's being warned again and again, chayiv al kolachas v'achas. He is chayiv every single time that he's being warned. V'amai hometame v'koyim. He's already tamei, so how should he become tamei again? So from the Mishnah, you have a raya to the point that Rav Huna said that you could become you've tamei and you become tamei again if you get a separate warning, you chayiv for each one. So the Gemara says, so Ella Kashia Adadi. Really, we now have a contradiction here from our Mishnah to the Braisa. The Gemara understands that the halacha of a Nazir and a Kayin is the same. If by a Nazir you can be chayiv each one separately, so by a Kayin it should also be the same. So by a Kayin we learned that once you're tamei, you can't become tamei again to be chayiv a second time. By a Nazir, our Mishnah says you are. So there's a contradiction here. So the Gemara answers, Loi Kashia. There's no contradiction. It depends on the case. Kam b'chiburin. By the case of the kohen, he's connected to the tumah. The case over there that the Braisa said was the kohen is carrying this mace on his shoulders. He's touching the mace. And kan shaloi b'chiburin. In our Mishnah, when it said that the Nazir became tummy already, and now he becomes tummy a second time, that he's chayiv for the second time, he wasn't touching a mace. What was the example that Rav Huna brought before? He was standing in a base hakvaris, but he wasn't touching a mace. Now, what's the difference if you're touching the mace or not touching the mace? So, what the Gemara is trying to say is that when you're touching the mace, there's a more stringent tumah here. So when you are not touching the mace, you're just standing in a base hakvaris because it's not such a stringent tumah. So therefore, if now you touch a mace, which is a more stringent tumah, so it adds to the level of your tumah. So therefore, you chayav a second time. But if you're already touching the mace, the case by the kohen, and now you're touching a second mace, it doesn't add anything. So there, taka, you won't be chayav a second time. Now, what is this added stringency of tumah that there is when you're actually touching the mace, which the Gemara calls chiburin?
Means that
he's standing in the Beis HaKvaris. He's not mechuber. The second time is bechiburin. The second time, right? In the Mishnah, the second time he touched the mace. The first time he was just standing in the Beis HaKvaris. The second time he touched the mace. What's the added stringency when you touch a mace? As we'll see right now from the continuation of the Gemara, the added stringency is that if you're actually touching a mace, and now another person touches you, he becomes tameh as if he's touching the mace itself. It's like your body becomes an extension and the other person that touches you, because it's like you're connected to the mace. Whereas if you're just standing in a Beis HaKvaris and you're not touching the mace, and another person touches you, even though he's not inside the Beis HaKvaris, he does not become tameh. So we see that chiburin is a stronger tumah. But the Gemara asks on this, the tumah b'chiburin the iraisa, this additional stringency, when you're touching the mace, when you're connected to the mace, this is an added stringency of tumah, which is minatayra. But here we see that this added stringency is not minatayra. Why not? Because Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, Amar Rav Yanai, lo amru tumah b'chiburin elo l'truma v'kachim. This entire concept of tumah b'chiburin was only said regarding truma and kachim. By truma and kachim, if there's a person that's touching a mace, and then the kohen that has to eat the tumah comes and touches this person that's touching the mace, it'll be as if he touched the mace himself, and it'll be tameh. But a nazir that's not allowed to touch a mace, or a person that has to bring a carbon pesach, if he touched someone that's touching a mace, we don't say that it's chiburin, that it's as if he touched the mace himself. So there's a distinction between them. Now, if you're going to say that this idea of tumah b'chiburin, that if you touch someone that's touching a mace, that there's a stringency, that you become tummy like you touched the mace himself, that's minat Torah, ma'ishna. Why should there be any distinction? Minat Torah, there's no reason to make any distinctions for this. If it's exerim with the Rabbanon, so you could say that the Rabbanon were more machmir regarding truma and kachim, as a precaution for the kohen eating the truma and kachim, but not by a Nazir and Pesach. But if it's minat Torah, why should there be any distinction here? So the Gemara answers, well, it depends on the chiburin, it depends on the case here. Kan b'chiburei adam b'adam, kan b'chiburei adam b'meis. It depends if we're talking about 3 people or 2 people. Meaning, if it's a situation of Adam ba'Adam, meaning Reuven's touching the mace, Shimon touches Reuven, and Levi touches Shimon. So to say that if you have 2 people in between, the third person that's touching the mace, there it's like only a gzeira with the Rabbana that the third person becomes Tameh, and that gzeira only applies by Truma and Kachim, and not by Nazir and Pesach. But if it's chiburei adam b'meis, if it's just one person that's touching the mace, and the second person comes and touches that person touching the mace, that's a halacha minat Torah that the second person becomes tameh, and there's no distinction between trumah, kachim, nazir, pesach, and therefore the answer we said before remains that by chiburin there's a higher level of tumah, and therefore if the nazir was standing in the Beis HaKvaris and there was no tumah of chiburin, and now he touches a mace and there's a higher stringency of level of tumah, there's an additional tumah here, so therefore he'll be chayiv twice because of the added tumah that's here.
Why are you saying
Okay,
3 people?
that's so we'll continue the Gemara the other time.
Why